Hey guys, it's me. Okay, we're going to get started. This is 12.2. We're going to be solving quadratic equations by taking roots. Okay, I happen to know that in Algebra 2 and everything, you do a lot of this. You will be doing this. So therefore, this is not one of those things that I can skip, even though I would love to, and y'all probably will too. There's a basic format to this, okay? It's kind of like you're going to do the same thing. It's like a pattern, and you're going to do the same thing for all of the problems. The only area I think that you are going to get stumped on is the fact that we're still dealing with radicals. And some of y'all still are kind of, not understanding it that well and everything. That's just going to take practice. You're going to have to get on to the IXL links, and you're going to need to practice the radical stuff, simplifying them and such, dividing and everything, and what happens when you have a radical in the denominator. Excuse me. Okay. Y'all laughed. I know you did. Okay. So we're going to just jump right in. Please watch this slowly. Don't panic or anything. And if you need to, get up, walk away, take a little break, come back to it, rewind, and play it again. You're just going to have to be relaxed with this. Okay? All right. And one more thing. You need to take notes on this. I strongly suggest you take notes, because when you're doing your homework, unless you have this video up in front of you, it could be a little tough. Trust me. Okay, so let's get started. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the square root property. All right, number one, if n is greater than 0, these are like rules, by the way, then x has 2 real solutions. This is going to make more sense to you in a minute, okay? Now, let me explain. N is going to be your answer. I know. Why don't they just say the answer is greater than 0? So if when you're working this, if the answer is greater than 0, then x is going to have 2 real solutions. And it's written with that plus and minus sign in front. Okay, because that means that when there's 2 real solutions, you're going to have a positive one and a negative one. So it's written just like this. Again, when you see my examples, it's going to make more sense. But this is why I'm saying take notes, because you're going to have to be referring back to this quite often. All right, number 2. If n equals 0, then 1 real solution. Okay, so if the answer, and I do say answer, and you'll see what I'm talking about. If the answer equals 0, then you're going to have 1 real solution. And 3, rule 3, if n is less than 0, and that means if it's less than 0, it's negative, right? So if you get a negative answer, then there are no real solutions. That's your answer. Okay? All right, so if the answer is less than 0, if it's a negative, then your answer is that there's no real solution. If it's greater than 0, and any, like even if it was 0.2, 0.16758, whatever, if it's greater than 0, that's not greater than 0. Yeah, it is. Okay, then x is going to have 2 real solutions, plus and minus. Okay, now how to solve it. Solving equations. I'm still stuck on that example I just gave you off the top of my head. I'm not sure if that's correct. That's okay, it doesn't matter. You get my point. Okay, solving equations of the form ax squared minus c equals 0. Blah, 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 blah. That's not even really all that important, but you got to know it. So step 1, when solving what we're doing today, you need to isolate the squared, which is this part right here. So you're going to isolate the squared expression. Now what does that sound like to you guys? Isolate the squared expression. You're going to isolate the variable. Intruder alert, okay? But you're going to have like a squared, x squared, whatever, okay? So you're going to be isolating the variable, but what you're isolating is that right there, that x squared. Okay, so do you understand that? Step 1 is to isolate the variable, but what you're isolating is the squared variable. All right, now step 2, put a little red star there because that's important. After you isolate the variable, you're going to apply the square root property. And what that means, square everything. Putting another red star there. So the first thing you do, isolate that variable, the squared variable. Then you're going to apply the square root property, which means you're going to square everything. You know, the radical sign, I'll even put that right there. You're going to put that radical sign on everything. And then step 3, you're going to simplify the radical and solve each equation. All right. We're going to jump right in and start doing examples. Something I need to discuss with you. There's been some use of math apps in math class. Please know that from here on out, including whatever exam I give you, if there's even a thought that you use a math app, you get an automatic 0. Now, being that it's a test, you'll get an automatic 50. There's not going to be an argument because I've caught several of you, and because of that, now you have that history, so then there's not going to be any argument. If I even think that you're using it, you're getting the 50. And it's already been cleared with Mr. B and Dr. Gap. So please keep that in mind. You and I have talked. I would much rather have a kid bomb a test or bomb their homework or even bomb the entire year honestly than pass dishonestly. Okay? So therefore, you are going to show all your work. Got it? You have to show all your work or you get no credit for that problem. I don't care if it's right. You will not get credit for the problem. So I've posted it, it's been written, I've messaged some of you, and now you're hearing it in the video. No excuse. You will show all of your work or you will get a 0 if it's homework or 50 if it's a test or quiz. Got it? Okay, moving along. Y'all know I'm serious. Let's go to the other side. We're going to go ahead and get started on examples. Page 491. Number 1. Okay, the directions say solve using the square root property. Okay, that's important. Solve using the square root property. Watch what I do. The problem is x squared equals 25. And here's the thing. You guys are so smart, y'all don't need to use those apps. Y'all do not need to use those because you can do this. Now, if you look, it's already step 1, isolate the squared expression, isolate the variable. It's done that for you already. It's already isolated. Second, apply the square root property. Square everything using the radical sign. So, watch this, guys. There you go, step 2. See, that was step 1, making sure that x squared is isolated, and it is. It already is written. Then the step 2 is to square everything. So, the square root of x squared is x, right? What's the square root of 25? 5. Now, you're not quite done, but you're almost there. So, let me ask you, first of all, is this answer, remember this part right here, if the answer is greater than 0, how many solutions does it have? 2. And it's written like that. So 5 is greater than 0. So I'm going to put a little arrow because then you can have this to look back on in your notes. It's greater than 0. Therefore, it's going to be plus and minus. Remember that right there. If it's the answer is greater than 0, it has 2 real solutions, and you use the plus and minus. Because, guys, look here. I'm going to write it over here. 5 times 5 is 5 squared, yes? Which is 25. Correct? Yes. So the square root of 25 is 5. But negative 5 times negative 5, that's negative 5 squared. Isn't that 25 also? So negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Did you see that? So positive 5 and positive 5 gives you 25, but negative 5 and negative 5 also give you 25. It can be both. Y'all have always up until now assumed, oh, the answer is just 5. Not necessarily. The square root of 25 can also be negative 5 times negative 5. So therefore, your actual answer is positive or negative 5. See, we've taken it up a little bit. Y'all have always, up until now, thought that the square root of 25 is just 5. And in essence, it is. But in reality, if you notice, negative 5 times negative 5 is 25, positive 25. Therefore, the actual answer is positive and negative 5. Positive 5 and negative 5. See that? Okay, once you get that, you're good for the rest of this section. No kidding, you really are. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so number 3. Again, we're using the, what is it called? The square root property. We haven't gone to taking roots yet. This one, again, is set up for you. I'm not going to give y'all the really hard stuff since we're not in the classroom, so y'all can be happy about that. So step 1 is isolating the variable. I hate to keep flipping. So step 1 is isolating the squared variable. And then step 2 is we're going to square everything. So step 1, we've isolated the squared variable. So step 2, we square everything with the radical sign. I'm going to rewrite it and throw on that radical sign. Okay, so the square root of x squared is just x. However, that's not a perfect square. Square root of 6 is not a perfect square. So over here to the side, we can do our little factor tree. 2 times 3. Okay, yeah, those are our prime factors, but do we have any pairs? Remember, it has a root of 2. Do we have a pair of 2's? No. Therefore, it's going to stay just the square root of 6 because we're simplifying. Here, look, let me show you. That's number 3. Number 3 is simplify the radical and solve each equation. Well, we're supposed to be simplifying here, and there's nothing to simplify. It's already simplified. However, that is greater than 0. Is that a negative number? No. Is that equal to 0? No. That's square root of 6. And in fact, if you did it on a calculator, it will come up with some weird decimal answer, but it's still greater than 0. Therefore, it's going to be plus and minus. So your answer is x equals plus minus the square root of 6. See how that works? So both of these are very similar. We start off with it already isolated. We square both sides. We're simplifying and taking it out of the square. The square root of 25 is going to be positive or minus 5 because this is greater than 0. And this cannot be simplified anymore. It's not a perfect square, but it is greater than 5, so it's plus or minus square root of 6. Okay, 5. I'll hurry. Okay, I'm lying, I'm not going to hurry. X squared minus 100 equals 0. Okay, now this one's taking it a little bit further. The squared variable was already isolated. This time it's not. So we need to isolate the variable. Intruder alert. And y'all can explain to your parents, if I haven't already said that we have, this is you have basically like a 100-year-old intruder and a 0-aged or infant cop. I think it's a win for you either way. Okay, so to isolate the variable, this is a negative 100. So to move it to the opposite side across that equal sign, so this is by itself, we have to do the opposite. So we're adding 100 on both sides. That cancels out, and I'm left with, x squared equals 100. Okay, so we're now at step 1. We've isolated the squared variable. Step 2 is to square both sides. Okay, now this, the square root of x squared is just x. You know that. This is a perfect square. So the square root of 100 is 10. Because, again, some of y'all, I know your brain is fried. Some of y'all are making some silly mistakes, and y'all know who you are because you've contacted me. Because 10 times 10, and I'm not naming names, and y'all can't even see who I'm looking at. Anyway, I won't even say what row they sit in at school. 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, so we have this. Now, is that greater than 0 or less than 0 or what? It is greater than, greater than 0. I won't be too much further. So therefore, it's going to be plus or minus, okay? So then the answer is x equals plus or minus 10. Okay, so again, we isolate the variable, the squared variable. We squared both sides with the radical sign. We took that, lucky us, that's a perfect square. And it's greater than 0, so it's going to have 2 real solutions because it's greater, the answer is greater than 0. And we use that symbol there. And there you go. Okay. Number 9. It's x squared plus 5 equals 0. Okay, again, we need to isolate the variable. Intruder alert, 5-year-old intruder. That's you. Push him out the front door, which is the equal sign, by doing the opposite. It's plus 5, so we have to subtract 5 on both sides. I'm teaching 6th grade this right now. This is the first time that they'll ever hear it. If I can teach 3rd graders this, I can teach the 6th grade this. X squared equals -5. Okay, now we need to, that's step 1. We've isolated the variable. So then we have to square both sides. But to be honest, we can stop there because guess what? That answer, is it greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? It's a negative number. It's negative. It is going to be less than 0. It's negative. Therefore, what is your answer? If it's less than 0, if you have a negative answer, then the answer actually is no real solution. You have no real solution if it's negative. That's your answer. No real solution. Okay? That's the actual answer. All right, 11. 3x squared equals 51. Okay, so we need to use the square root property. We need to isolate the variable, the squared variable. There's a 3 next to that x squared, so what does that mean? What operation is taking place? We're multiplying. So what's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we divide both sides by 3. Those 3's cancel out, and I'm left with x squared equals 51 divided by 3 is 17. Okay? Now that we've done step 1, we've isolated the squared variable. Now we are going to do step 2, which means we square both sides using the radical sign. All right, the square root of x squared is just x. 17 is prime. Now I'm going to write this down for future reference. It's prime. It can't simplify any further. You can't do a factor tree or anything on it. That's a prime number. But is it greater than 0? That is greater than 0. Therefore, it's going to be that positive and negative. So your answer, it's simplified as much as it can be. Your answer is plus minus the square root of 17. Okay. 13. No, that was 13. No. Oh, okay. Ooh, these are almost similar. Okay, so 13. This is solved by taking roots. Same thing. We're going to do the same thing, y'all. So see how similar those problems were? All right, so first step is to isolate the variable. So we're going to divide both sides by 3 because you're multiplying here, and we need to divide. That's the opposite. So then we have x squared equals 81 divided by 3 is 27. Okay, so step 2, we need to square both sides. All right, the square root of x squared is just x, and over here we're going to do our factor tree of 27. 9 times 3 gives me 27, and we circle our 3 because it's prime. 3 times 3 gives us 9, so we circle those 3's. I'm going to write out my prime factors. Okay, what's the root? We don't have anything right there in the little check thing. It's 2, so we circle our pairs. So then, where does that 3 go? On the outside. The leftover goes on the inside. This, is that greater than, equal to, or less than 0? Well, there's a whole number 3 there. That's not a negative, so therefore it is greater than 0, And so it's going to be plus or minus. So it's x equals plus or minus 3 times square root of 3. Now, if you leave off the plus and minus, it is wrong. So y'all need to make sure, don't just get to this part and say, I'm done. Y'all see that that's a very common mistake. So you need to ask yourself before you box in your answer, is it greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? Okay. Here. 15. I have 4x squared equals 50. We're isolating the variable. We're going to divide both sides by 4. That cancels out. And I'm left with x squared equals 50 over 4. Is that in lowest terms? No, it's not. So you need to put it in lowest terms. You can keep it as an improper fraction, but you must put it in lowest terms. Okay, so now I have x squared equals 25 over 2. Because remember, we had to put this in lowest terms. All right. Now, that's step 1. We've isolated the variable. Step 2 is we square both sides. Yes, I'm aware it's a fraction. And some of you, which will remain nameless, cannot stand fractions. Hang in there. All right, here we go. We square both sides. All right. Think back to the radical chapter. Chapter 11, I believe it is. Once you square that whole thing, you break it down into 2. What's the square root of 25? 5 over square root of 2. Can I have a radical sign in the denominator? Nope. How do you get rid of that? You multiply the top and bottom by that same radical. So 5 times the square root of 2 is 5 times square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. That's a perfect square. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. You see that? All right, so we went from here, broke it down, that's a perfect square, we got 5. We just brought over the square root of 2. Can't have radical in the denominator, so we multiply the top and the bottom by that same radical sign. 5 times square root of 2 is 5 times square root of 2. Radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4. That's a perfect square, so the square root of 4 is 2. That's where I got that. All right, so square root of x squared is x. And we have solved this. That is greater than, don't forget that part, 0. Therefore, we're going to have a plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 5 times the square root of 2 over 2. Okay. Y'all may need to rewind that one and do it again. It's okay. Go slow, one step at a time. All right, number 17. I got this. This is the last one I'm doing. That's right. This is the last one I'm doing. All right. 4x squared minus 16 equals 3x squared plus 9. Okay, y'all know how to do this. You've been doing this for years. You can do it in your sleep. We have to isolate the variable, the squared variable. That 3x squared is on the wrong side of that equal sign. We need to bring it over here. This is also, what is that, positive or negative? When there's no sign there, it's positive, boys and girls, not negative. There's no negative sign there. So the opposite of positive 3x squared is negative 3x squared. So I'm going to start there. Those cancel out. So 4x squared minus 3x squared, that gives you x squared, or 1x squared. Some of you like writing that 1. And I'm rewriting my problem. So now we got to get rid of the negative 16. Same thing. We got to add 16 to both sides of the equals. Those cancel out, and I'm left with x squared plus, whoops, not plus, equals, sorry, 25. That's an equals. All right, so now we need to square both sides, and I get x equals 5. That is greater than 0. Therefore, it's one of those plus and minuses, so x equals plus or minus 5. There you go. That's it. Okay, so for homework, see, I think y'all probably saw the pattern there and have caught on fairly well. Plus, page 491, you're going to be doing numbers 2 through 18 even. That's 9 problems. I think you can handle it. Is due Wednesday. You're scheduled for a quiz on Wednesday, but you have nothing to quiz on. So I'm moving your quiz, unfortunately. I think I'm going to move it to Friday. We'll see. Yeah, probably Friday. Okay, so you've got your quiz Friday. This is due Wednesday. I'm not assigning any IXL, but if you want to do well on that quiz on Friday, then you better study. Okay? All right, if you need anything, let me know, and I will do my best to help you. All right, take care. Bye-bye.